Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of the different competitors that we have for CPTC. I am pleased to introduce you all to a panel of folks that we have from our premier sponsor, IBM Security, that are going to talk with us about a few things that they're doing and give us some more information around the faces of X-Force Red and X-Force at IBM. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this off to Nick, who is going to introduce us to our panelists today and introduce some of the topics that we're going to be talking about.
Lucas, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I can say very enthusiastically, IBM is incredibly proud to be a sponsor of this event. We hire a lot of our IT grads, as I think you'll hear today. So it's great to be able to be involved with this event. Today we've got a great group of folks here. Some of them work on our team in X-Force and for us specifically, but I'll dive right in. I'm Nick Rossman. I'm the global lead for X-Force Threat Intelligence. Our teams are reverse engineering malware and studying threat groups to put them into context for both our customers in our services teams, but also in our IBM security products. And I'll let everyone else do a brief introduction. First, I will turn it to Megan Roddy.
Hi, my name is Megan Roddy, as Nick said. I work on the threat analysis group team in X-Force Threat Intelligence as a cyber threat researcher. So I'm looking at the current threat landscape and providing information to our clients on the different threats we're seeing and we've uncovered.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott Brink. I'm a RIT alum, graduated back in 2019. I was a CPTC competitor, captain of the RIT team in 2018. I now work full-time as a penetration tester for X-Force Red with a focus on network penetration testing.
Scott, thanks. Kevin? Got it. Thank you. As we are going through the panel today, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the YouTube chat. I'll be looking at them at the screen to my left if you want to drop any of them in. Before we start, one area that I wanted to talk about was some of the recent research we've done on the cold chain and the vaccine-related distribution. So about 2 months ago, we published information that hit the New York Times about spear phishing attacks against companies that were associated with the cold chain. So the cold chain is all the ways that the vaccine is actually distributed to hospitals or clinics to be delivered into people's arms. That could be everything from the packaging, manufacturers who are involved in the supply of glass vials, or the actual containerizing those vaccines as well and packaging them together to get onto trucks. What we saw was a varied campaign that targeted 6 countries in Europe and Asia, a variety of organizations, mostly associated with a organization called the Gavi Alliance. The Gavi Alliance, it helps developing nations be able to produce and distribute vaccines. They'll be critical in the COVID-19 vaccine delivery, as well as we deliver them out to the developing world. What was interesting about the targeting is how varied it was. It was very precise in the spear phishing emails that were sent to specific individuals in the organization using a request for quotation as a way to generate interest. And that went to your typical people who would respond to a request for quote to, hey, let's do business together. So with that, we were able to go back and start to take a look. We couldn't determine the exact adversary behind the incident, or if it was a cyber criminal or nation state. I think overall, it was more likely a nation state attempting to better understand how to conduct cold chain activities overall. And with that, it was incredibly concerning for us that we saw this activity. And for us at IBM Security, we had started looking at COVID-19 related threat research early on during the pandemic. That started with the flood of spear phishing emails that came out related, using COVID-19 as a theme. But then over time, tracking how adversaries were going after the research facilities and biopharmaceutical companies that were targeting that research, as well as in the summer, a spear phishing campaign that targeted a task force in Germany that was assembling PPE. So with that, I wanted to touch a little bit on the research. Happy to answer additional questions. I know that there might have been a problem with Kevin's mic, I see in the chat. So I'd love to give another try to see and reintroduce Kevin, who's one of our lead malware reverse engineers. Kevin, I'll pitch it back to you.
Okay, great. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm the lead malware reverse engineer on the malware and development team. And so basically, I'll provide malware analysis support for the incident response and threat hunting teams and other teams throughout the organization. And on a daily basis, I provide deep dive analysis, triage analysis, write Python scripts, configuration parsers, and work with a whole bunch of different tools to complete my daily task.
Kevin, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I hope everyone got to hear the intro. I'm monitoring the chat, and it looks like they did. So I wanted to start with the group. Megan, I'd love to hear this question. How did you get here with this opportunity with X-Force? What was your career progression like in your journey?
So I actually kind of have a different background than intelligence. I got my degree, or I was working on my master's degree in digital forensics when I got a role as an incident responder SOC analyst at the Texas Department of Public Safety. From there, after being there for a few years, I went on and I moved to working with a small managed service security provider startup. And there I kind of did the same kind of thing, SOC analyst, incident responder. It's a small company, so there's a few, many hats worn. And then I actually was applying to be an X-Force incident responder when I was originally applying for jobs, because I kind of had this clear-cut goal of, especially with my degree being in digital forensics and incident response, I wanted to go that way. And for that specific role, they told me I didn't have enough of a background in incident response for it, but they referred me over to a job opening that was open at the same time as a threat researcher. And I had no background in it, and I wasn't really sure what I was in for, but it was kind of like, it seemed like a great opportunity and that something I'd potentially enjoy. And I was looking for a job, so I went ahead and applied and ended up getting the position. And then as of yesterday, I've been with IBM for 2 years and I'm still loving it. So my background was actually incident response, but in cybersecurity, there's so many diverse fields. Even now, I'm working part-time with our Intel development team on automating our workflows. So even if you're starting off thinking of something like incident response or pen testing, you never know where your career might go in cybersecurity, and there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Thanks, Megan. I think it's really indicative of the X-Force team generally, whether it's in Red, IR, threat intelligence. We've got a lot of different roles, but people are using a variety of skills in their backgrounds every day. Scott, I want to turn over to you as a CPTC alum of the competition. What was your journey to X-Force Red? And how has that been for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I was a RIT alum. I actually never participated in CPTC up until my senior year. But originally, I applied to a bunch of jobs, and I got accepted for the XFR internship in the first class back in 2018. Went through the internship. I loved it. We talked about that at the career fair, and through that internship, it gave me all of the skills that I needed to transition into being the CPTC captain, and then from there transitioning into a full-time employee now. And a lot of what I saw in CPTC, which is a large network, the largest I had ever seen up to that point, I'm seeing now in my real job. I'm seeing those large networks pretty much nearly identical to some of the old CPTC networks that I've seen.
Scott, that's great. Kevin, how about your journey? What was it like to get to the position you were in? I know you've had a varied background in development and on the government side.
Right. So I'm a little older than Megan and Scott. So when I started, my degree wasn't in forensics or reverse engineering. It was like a general IT degree. So I graduated from Virginia State University out of Petersburg, Virginia. Virginia State is a HBCU, or historically Black College and University. So I graduated from there with a bachelor's in information systems and the system sciences. And so that type of degree kind of introduces you to different forms, different systems within IT. But along my stay with Virginia State, I had opportunity to participate in 2 co-ops. And so those had a great effect on me getting my first job out of college, which was with IBM. So this is my second go around with IBM. So I started working with IBM after Virginia State, maintaining COBOL programs. So I had a good time there once I joined IBM for the first time. Traveled a lot of different places, working with mainframes, made a lot of good friends. And so after I graduated Virginia State, joined IBM for the first time, then I eventually got my security clearance and started working for government contractors like Lockheed and General Dynamics. And while I was with them, I had a variety of roles, everything from system administration, programming, application testing, application performance testing. And all of those things helped me on my job today because security touches all of those systems. So basically, security touches everything. So I pull on all of my experience with those types of programs in my daily job. And I've been doing reverse engineering and forensics for 11 years now. And so I've been loving it ever since. I'm always learning something new. I'm always learning something new from new team members because I started 11 years ago. Sometimes I'm still set on using a specific set of tools. So when talking to different team members, I'm learning about new tools and new techniques, and I incorporate those into my daily job. And last year, I was able to complete a master's degree in information systems engineering with Johns Hopkins, and so that was a really nice experience. I got some more experience to how to actually set up a vision from setting up a vision to how to actually complete actually engineering a system from beginning to end and all these security considerations involved.
Kevin, sounds like a really diverse background in your life, from going from IT into security and deep diving into reverse engineering.
Right.
And certainly, the value of continuously learning as a part of that, whether it's from your teammates or in other degrees. One question we got was for Scott. I wanted to ask you, what's your day-to-day like as a pen tester with X-Force Red? What, for the teams that are here today and what they could expect in the type of role that you're in?
Sure. So my day-to-day, X-Force Red does pen testing for a bunch of clients. So at any time, we usually have one main focus test. But as you're doing, like right now, I'm on a test for a transportation company, and I have 2 weeks in their internal network, and they have a possible IP space of, if people are familiar with networking, it's a /16, which is about a possibility of 65,000 different hosts, usually closer to like 2,000 or 3,000. So I'll spend a lot of time trying to access a lot of the hosts on that network. Usually in that size of a network, you want to start with their central management, which is their Active Directory, and you try to break in through there. Then usually from Active Directory, you then try to pivot into the Linux side. But the really cool thing about it is I'm not just on one network for the entire time. If I had been on one network for a year and a half at this point, I don't think I'd be still having fun. Every 2 weeks, you're getting a different test. You might have a new web app the next week. You might have a mobile application. You might have an ATM that you need to hack that week after that. You're constantly changing what you're working on. And while you're doing these tests, you'll still have to do the boring parts of it. You'll have to do the reporting. You'll have to do the calls with clients to explain to them exactly why, like, hey, we found this vulnerability allowing every domain password to be stored in plain text. And it kind of explained to the client what the actual risk associated with that one setting is. So it kind of fits in perfectly with CPTC, being you have the testing phase, which is a main portion of my job, and then you move into your reporting phase, which is another thing that I do every day. And then at the end, you'll have that final presentation saying, here's what we found. Here is the actual risk that is associated with the vulnerabilities that we found. So that's kind of a standard day-to-day, is it's always changing because you keep getting new tests, new clients, new technologies. So you really have to stay on your feet and be willing to be like, I don't know what this is, and ask people on your team to help out if you get stuck on anything too.
Scott, that's really interesting. Megan, I wanted to turn it to you with this question. And how do you, both in your current job now and even before, stay up to date on the threat landscape to kind of understand and help teams and clients know about what's going on in their environments?
Yeah, so some of our sub teams, like the threat hunt team, they're specifically looking like diving on data and trying to find like original material stuff that hasn't been reported on. But my team, like staying apprised of the threats that are being publicly reported on, is kind of our job. So a lot of that is blog posts from the other big companies. So if Palo Alto or Cisco or any of those companies are publishing material, we're reading that. Parsing out any indicators of compromise, like hashes and IP addresses, and sharing those with our clients. We'll look at independent researchers. Twitter's become very popular for quick, like, hey, I found this malicious file, and obviously that single finding may be something we can dive deeper on. But yeah, big thing is rounding up the IOCs. Because those are things that the IP addresses and hashes that can be fed into client systems and alerted on. And then alongside those, we provide our little summary of why are we sharing these indicators, what's the threat associated, so that when responders get an alert and says, hey, IBM has in their system that this IP is malicious, they can go read this blurb and say, okay, well, it's associated with ransomware. Here's a link to where they found this information. And it really just gives a lot of context to responders who know they've potentially got something bad, but they can also look into why is it bad.
Megan, that's a great point. Scott, how about you in your role as a pen tester? How do you stay abreast of the threats that apply to the risks and vulnerabilities that you're finding?
So funnily enough, it's actually almost the exact same things. I'm looking at blog posts from independent researchers. I am also very active on Twitter because everyone will say, hey, I released a new tool. Hey, this new vulnerability. Like I found out about the SolarWinds backdoor instantly because I'm very active on Twitter. Right after that, a bunch of our adversary simulation team uh, took a look at all of the researchers who were tweeting out like, hey, I wrote a blog post on this. Hey, I did this. Hey, I did that. Um, Another thing I use is there are a lot of really good weekly security podcasts, and it'll just be a quick roundup of the security news because there's so much that no one person is going to be able to keep up with everything. So if I have 2 or 3 weekly podcasts that I listen to, which is maybe an hour to 2 hours a week max, it will hit a lot of those big points that I might not have seen on Twitter. I might not have seen on anything else like that.
Scott, that's a great point. Kevin, how about you with malware analysis? I know you hit some of those same open source items, but what else you look at?
Right, yeah. I'm with Scott and Megan. I utilize those same things, YouTube videos, blogs, Twitter, different articles from the different companies. One thing that's helpful, since there's so much out there, is to have some type of a tool to help you organize and sift through the different articles and whatnot. For example, we have there's a Slack channel here that I joined, and it automatically sends like OSINT feeds there. And so I look through that, pick out anything that's interesting. Part of being on the malware team is looking for like new malware that may be some type of threat in the future. So we try to be proactive and try to find additional samples and go on analyzing those.
Kevin, that's a great point. And IBM has some of those resources. Megan talked about where she works a lot on is X-Force Exchange. That's where a lot of her analysis is going. We also have our security intelligence blog, and then also the IBM security community, which is more product focused, but it can be a great spot to also coordinate on. One other question I've seen is, what's the value of competitions like this and being involved in special interest groups, whether that's WISIS or ISC squared? Scott, I'll direct it to you. You mentioned earlier the value of this competition, but what else? What other soft skills did it help you with?
So I actually did a lot more of like defensive oriented competitions prior to me doing CPTC, and all of those taught me like a lot of the technical skills that I would need and just common like things like, oh, do this in Linux, do that in Windows. But what really makes CPTC stand out is I always tell people at the end of the day, CPTC, yeah, it's technical to an extent, but you are never going to be in a room with as many people as you are for that final presentation that all really know what they're talking about. I think when I went up to that presentation, there were 10 plus people in there who were all acting as the judges. And every time, like that experience, whenever I do that now for my job, it's less stressful doing it for my job with actual clients than when I was in that room watching everyone there. And then on the report writing side of it, it's really, I needed to figure out how to contextually explain what these vulnerabilities are, because I can say, oh yeah, look at me, I have SQL injection. If you just say that to some CEO, they're going to say, what is that? Like, why do I care what a SQL injection is? So you need to say, hey, I could dump all of the passwords for every user and every single user and log into everything and steal all your client data. And learning how to contextualize that and kind of assign risks to vulnerabilities. If I hadn't have done CPTC, I would have had zero experience of that before leaving college.
That's a great point. So those type of presentation skills and putting things into context, putting the activity into context. Right. Megan, I know you've been involved with a lot of different affinity groups or groups outside in cybersecurity. How has that helped you in your career, both advance and in your current role?
I think like the biggest part for me has been networking. So I was never really an extroverted person. I still in a lot of ways am not, but I'm definitely more now. And part of it has just been like having a supportive community, and like probably 90% of my friends I've met through security, whether it be at meetups or conferences. And so just like the networking is the biggest factor. Like I'm not very good at sitting through hour-long talks, but I happily go to conferences just for the purpose of spending time with people and getting to know them. And a lot in the industry is like who you know, whether that be getting a job. So knowing people who work at places gives you opportunities for jobs, especially in a role like Intel. Obviously, we get a lot of inside intel from either places we used to work or people we have connections with. So building those connections can also help you with the work you do. You're not always going to be on the biggest team. And so if you know someone, if you've made connections with people who are subject matter experts in a specific area, typically most people in this industry are pretty friendly and will help share the knowledge. So I definitely think networking is a major aspect in this field. Computer scientists in this kind of field, you think it's a bunch of introverts, and sometimes we are. A lot of us are, but it's also a very good community, one that introverts are welcomed into in a way.
Absolutely. Kevin, how about for you? What sort of non-academic work that are non-academic activities have you done in the past to be involved or learn more, and how has that helped your career?
For me, it's basically just trying to, I participated in one of the SANS, capture the flag competitions, and all those competitions help, like the other panelists were saying, help with team building, help with your confidence in explaining technical things to non-technical people, which is a very important skill to have, because I have to write malware analysis reports, and those can be very technical, but you have to sometimes write them in a manner that a lot of different people from different backgrounds can understand. So having being able to get real world experience outside of academics helps with team building, networking, and being able to communicate across different levels of experience.
That's a great point. Scott, how about for you? What has been the value of conferences and being at them? Megan talked about making connections and during them. How about for you, for Black Hat or DEF CON? Have you been able to use those in your career?
So yeah, I have. During my internship with X-Force Red, I was able to do a research project, and that research project I was able to present at a conference in Chicago called ThoughtCon. I also was able, due to my involvement with the XFR internship, I was able to help out as a goon. For those who aren't aware, that's one of the volunteers helping out set everything up at DEF CON. So I was able to goon my first DEF CON, which was definitely an experience, and it was a lot of fun. But when I was brought there, I was brought by someone on our team who is listed on the list of legendary goons for DEF CON. I was brought around, introduced to all of these crazy people, even someone who I have watched probably 10 of his DEF CON talks. I told him what I did as a goon, and he's like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I really appreciate what you do. So it was just a huge thing for me, because his videos inspired me to really get deeper into security. and he's thanking me for something I'm doing. One of the other goons that I met actually presented right before me at that ThoughtCon presentation. And as I'm walking up onto the stage, he looks at me and says, "Oh, hey, good luck on your talk, Scott." And we hadn't seen each other in 6+ months, but he had remembered me just from that brief interaction at DEF CON. So just from my few interactions, I've only been going to DEF CON, ThoughtCon, and B-sides all over the place for the past 2 or 3 years. It has been a huge impact for me already.
That's great. And you touched on something too, right? And you sound like you submitted your research for one of those events as well. How was the value of that, or what challenges did you find in doing that?
So during the X-Force Red internship, we have a research project with the goal of doing novel research and presenting that at a conference. The research that I did was on visitor management systems, which was that little kiosk you go into a doctor's office and you just sign in. Turns out those aren't very secure. So me and my research partner, Hannah Robbins, were able to get 19 CVEs, blog posts posted in Wired, and we submitted to a couple conferences and we were able to present at ThoughtCon. So that experience, to have all of that just from one internship, was just huge.
That's great. And one area too, I think we kind of get caught up in credentials sometimes, right? Or even in the process of responding, if you're as a part of, trying to win work when you're in a big company, you do a lot of proposal writing and certificates are a part of that. And it's almost like you're trying to stack those up when you're trying to win business. I think a question for all of you, and I'll go around the room, like, how important have those credentials been to your day-to-day job? What were the most important ones? Maybe leave aside what were the least important ones. But what were those most important ones that you've gotten the most value from outside of educational degrees, or it could be related? Megan, what about for you?
So I'm currently working on my master's from the SANS Institute, and part of that is I basically get a bunch of SANS certifications throughout the degree program. Those are kind of the equivalent of the courses. And I'll say those certifications have been really helpful because the way the program works is it's a lot of practical hands-on. Lots of labs. The teachers of those courses are professionals working in the industry, not academics who went straight from their PhD to teaching. And I think that's a lot of the time. I don't necessarily recommend getting a degree to people, even though I have a few. And I really hope the industry goes the way of the not just slapping bachelor's or master's degree on job postings, because that's what it has been culturally recently, because I find a lot of like university programs, they don't teach from practicality. They teach a lot of theory. And so doing certifications that come with labs on the red team side, obviously there's one of the big ones is the OSCP, and that's you're in a lab environment performing exercises, not multiple choice answers, trying to just recall, memorize knowledge. And so basically any certification program where you or course or whatever where you can get hands-on practical experience is going to be more beneficial than a degree or a certification that's just spewing out knowledge. Obviously, there are degrees and certifications like Security Plus or having a bachelor's in cybersecurity. Those will definitely help you from a resume boosting perspective. But if you come straight out of college with a bachelor's where they didn't give you any hands-on experience and expect to know what you're going to be doing every day, is probably not the case. You really need some hands-on training to be able to feel prepared coming into the work field.
That's a great point, Megan. Kevin, how about for you? What certs have been most valuable, or if not, why haven't they been, or what would you recommend for malware reverse engineering?
Um, for me, I have a ethical hacking certification, and I think that's pretty valuable because it introduces you to various tools that we see the actual hackers use in doing compromises. Um, but I'm on the same boat with Megan as far as having actual hands-on experience. It's okay to get the bachelor's degree and the master's degree as long as on your like course selections or you have the opportunity to select courses that give you that type of practical experience.
That's another thing, Kevin. Thanks for pointing that out too. Is trying to look for those opportunities within the academic community for those to get hands-on. Scott, for you, were certs helpful? What did you get? What made the big difference?
Yeah, so to kind of echo what everyone else said, and just for a little background, I have my bachelor's and I have no other certifications. I work with some people who don't even have their bachelor's. They have a GED, and that's all of they don't even have any certifications or anything like that. But the reason they can still like get jobs, perform well, is because they've done those hands-on things. Like CPTC is a huge one. All of the other like blue team competitions, CTFs, you can say, oh, I have my OSCP, for example. But if you can't remember any of the labs, if you can't explain, like, here were some of the challenges I went through during that, you need to be able to communicate what hands-on experience you learned throughout that process. And that doesn't even need to be, I finished the OSCP. It's like, I took the labs for OSCP and I did a bunch of stuff. I just never took the certification exam. That very well could have way more hands-on experience than someone else. So I wouldn't necessarily say certs are required. They're nice to have. It's just kind of, it'll help you get your foot in the door sometimes because it'll say, oh, they have all of these things. Let's talk to them and see if they actually know anything about those things. So they're nice to have, but it's just you need that hands-on experience, really just getting down into it. Because if once you're hands-on, you'll encounter way more problems that you never expected during the theory portion that you'll have to kind of fight with, and you'll learn a ton during that.
That's, Scott, I think we've all zeroed in on, how to get hands-on experience, whether that's through these competitions, the credentialing, even just taking the exams or the labs itself as a way to get around that. One thing also I've heard, Kevin, you've said before in the past of just, and I know a lot of your other team members do as well, and it's just using the malware reverse engineering tools, right, on your own. And nearly, for a lot of your team members, I don't know if you want to speak to that, just, hearing, hey, I've downloaded IDA, I've got it myself, and I'm trying to use it and do my own research.
Right, exactly. Just, part of the job is to analyze basically any file type that comes across our queue. It could be anything from Linux files, PE files, Bash script, PowerShell, and not one tool will get the job done. So sometimes you have to use a tool that you never actually used before. And so taking time to actually teach yourself other tools that you haven't used before is very, very, very important thing. It's a continuous learning in this field.
And I can say too, as a hiring manager, it's something that I, it's not a requirement in positions, but I certainly look for is like what excitement that person has in the job, and it helps to stand out when they say, hey, I'm doing this. And I've downloaded those labs, as Scott said, to try to get the job done, or they're trying to work on these different tools. We had a question come in here, and it's what customized or open source tools have been most useful for your job, and what futuristic tools would you love to see? I'll go around the room for that. Scott, can I pick on you first?
So for me, A lot of my testing is related to internal networks. So I'm a big Python, big Bash person. Um, a lot of the tools that I use are a lot of tools using the Packet suite of tools, which is a lot of network protocols rewritten in Python so it's easier to communicate via Windows. There's a bunch of different C2 frameworks. I don't really have any particular favorite one. Kind of like what Kevin was saying is you need to understand all of the different tools that you could use because certain ones have benefits in certain scenarios. There's another cool tool that helps visualize a lot of stuff for specifically Active Directory tests called Bloodhound. And that helps you determine in a network of 100,000 computers the relationships between each of these computers, the users, stuff like that. And all of these are common open source tools. So those are some of the ones I use. But every single test I do, I find another tool or two that I start adding just to my list of tools that I keep using every time.
Kevin,
and of course, Nmap.
Go ahead, Scott. What was that?
I was just saying, of course, Nmap as well. Nmap is one of the best tools of all time for network testing.
Kevin, how about for you? What open source tools have been most useful, and what kind of other futuristic tools would you like to see more of?
So for me, it basically is whatever does the job. Because you can knock on Google a lot of different things to help me get through analyzing a PE file or a bash script. But for the most part, I like to use the Didier Stevens suite of tools to analyze malicious documents. I use PE Bear, tools like that. And so that's what I was saying with learning a new set of tools. When I started, I don't think PE Bear was in existence. So that's something that I started to use, and I like using that tool. As far as futuristic tools, I'm not exactly sure what futuristic tools I would like to see, because the format of a PE file really hasn't changed. So maybe something to help bulk process things. Maybe I think.
That's a good point. Megan, how about you? What open source tools do you find most useful? I would say not just for your day job of all the work you do crunching through OSINT for our team and putting that on X-Force Exchange, but in your research and academic life that you've done, what else has been useful for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been kind of doing some work with the development team on automation. So as with Scott, Python's a big thing for me, being able to script, and that's all self-taught. I never took a class or certification in Python, and I'm doing it in my day-to-day job now. So an example of self-teaching. For Intel, I heavily use VirusTotal. I'm spoiled now with VirusTotal Premium, and I think that's now a job requirement. If I ever move to a different Intel job, they have to give me VirusTotal Premium because it's the best, but it's even the free version, being able to pivot and find other samples. In other tools I've used either in my IR background or IR studies, I love memory forensics and network forensics. So Volatility and Wireshark are definitely up there. And but Volatility in their repo has a bunch of memory samples you can use and download, like that are malicious or have malicious activities, so that you can test to see if you can find what's in there. And then malwaretrafficanalysis.net is a good website for getting keycaps to practice Wireshark forensics. And then in terms of tools I'd like to see, honestly, it's more adaptation on existing tools, kind of like where Kevin was saying he wants bulk processing. I found that where I'm having to script a lot of things using Python is where when you get bulk data, bulk results, it's hard to filter through them. Mm-hmm. Either they just don't allow filtering or their filters are limited. So like Virus Total recently, I got a big data set and there wasn't a good way to filter down within the search I did. So I scripted that, but I'd love to see tools just get better at allowing you to analyze big data sets.
That's an interesting point. Scott, I'll let you touch on the futuristic tools. I think you covered a couple of open source ones. Anything for your job that you'd love to see?
So I don't know if I can have any like futuristic tools. Maybe kind of just, piggyback off Megan a little here on that last one. When you get into a network that's 100,000 plus hosts, all of my tooling doesn't really handle that very well. It handles a lot of one-to-one connections. So there are a lot of bash for loops. There are a lot of like Python scripts to automate connecting and doing certain tasks on some of those, and maybe making it easier to do this testing on this extremely large network. That's probably the only futuristic tool, because most pen testing tools kind of need to deal with what is available right now and what vulnerabilities we need to exploit that are current. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of hard to go into the future to exploit vulnerabilities that don't exist yet. So it's kind of iffy on the pen testing side on how much futuristic we can get.
I see what you mean there. You know, one topic I wanted to turn to was diversity. And at IBM, we look at diversity in a variety of ways. And, you know, Megan, you have spoken publicly on neurodiversity and the importance of that. Can you talk to a little bit about your experience and, you know, what that has meant for your professional life and your work at IBM?
Yeah, so I talk publicly on my experiences as an autistic individual working in cybersecurity, and IBM has been a great environment. I feel like I can talk about it openly and talk with my managers about it and be understood, have the adjustments I need made. If something's not working, how can we adjust my workflow to support me more? At a higher level, there's a really big neurodiversity at IBM initiative, hiring programs for us. I helped co-found the Actually Autistic IBM group, which is kind of a task force of, I think right now we have over 50 autistic IBMers who collaborate on different neurodiversity issues at IBM or initiatives that are taking place. We kind of consult with the people running them, because often programs like that are run without the input of the individuals they're trying to support. And even though it's done in good faith, it's not necessarily done right without our voices. So just overall at IBM, I feel like it's something that it really is listened to and supported. Whereas other places, like, you might not necessarily get that. I know we have a lot of people in our autistic task force who at previous jobs never would talk to people about it, and even coming here felt it wasn't something they could share with their team, and have since said, well, I felt comfortable now talking with everyone, and I let my manager know today. So it's just a very welcoming environment, and that's important. You never want to work somewhere where you feel like you have to hide yourself. So I've been very lucky to be on a team and at a company where I can be open and get the support I need.
Thanks, Megan. Mm-hmm. Kevin, and how are the other ways we can help move the needle on diversity in race in the workforce and in cybersecurity generally? What have you seen in your experience?
I think for me is having resources available to those who can't afford it or in underserved communities. And I think the earlier you can get resources, the better. Having access to those types of resources, whether it be books or a laptop, so you can actually get involved and read different cybersecurity related topics online. Having resources in terms of mentorship, so you can see people that look like you, so you will feel comfortable in saying, okay, so this field is inviting to someone of a similar background. I know for me growing up, I didn't have a computer. I didn't really have a whole lot of resources. Um, but for me, having mentorship and mentorship can actually lead to you actually getting those resources. I think that's happened to me in most cases. Is that um, I have a very close relationship with teachers at my school, and so they kind of like took me under their wing and introduced me to opportunities in college and just helped me be prepared for any type of career, really. And that led into me actually getting into the cybersecurity, if that makes any sense. So having resources available, having mentorship available, I think are key things, and education is another thing.
That's a great point. And I know, big IBM sets out, big goals on the diversity side and are trying to support different communities as a part of that. And certainly, for us, we've got 270 business resource groups at IBM for diversity groups to be able to drive that. So it's an important part of our business and our work for everyone. And I can say as a manager, it's something we strive for as well on our team. That we try to have a diverse group of leaders and experts for our entire group. As we turn to some other issues, I wanted to see if there were any other questions. Feel free, as I look to my left here, to drop them into the YouTube chat on your screen if you've got any more. We've got about 8 minutes left. One thing I just wanted to hit on was the importance of publishing research and why IBM shares our research publicly. X-Force Threat Intelligence and X-Force Red are probably the two most prolific publishers of research within the IBM security community and within IBM writ large on threat activity. And we do that to help strengthen the security community writ large and trying to push others and make our knowledge available for free, and because we think it's vitally important to what we do. So whether that's publishing on our blogs or driving our teams to be able to present at conferences, that all comes together there. We had another question. Are there any personality traits that work well for jobs in cybersecurity? Scott, I'll turn that one to you. I'll broaden it out. Any other sort of non-tech skills that you're bringing to the table?
So one of the most common things that I'll see is people aren't willing to ask questions. And if you are willing to ask questions, that's what we want to see. We want to see you want to be able to say, hey, I'm having trouble trying to, whatever it is, analyze this malware, trying to break into this network. If you are willing to ask those questions, it's going to propel you so much further in the cybersecurity career, or in your cybersecurity career. Another thing, specifically in the offensive security side, is this one's kind of straightforward. Have good ethics. When you're hacking a bank for your job, don't actually steal the money. You want to make sure everything you're doing will not negatively affect the company. You don't want to test a client and then, we deleted all of your data, or we put a backdoor into the system that we didn't delete. Make sure that what you're doing is for the correct reasons. You're trying to strengthen their security. That's the whole point of offensive security. You're supposed to be adversary simulation, not an adversary.
That's a good point, Scott. Megan, how about you? What traits have you brought?
I'm a very logical thinker. I always say that it's good to have diverse trait skill sets because you got to have someone looking for every angle. But for me, my logicalness has benefited me a lot for sure. Being able to tackle problems and think of ways to tackle problems. I also think like passion and kind of like self-motivation is a big thing. Like we said, there's a lot to learn in the industry. And so if you're the kind of person who you're like, well, I got my degree, I'm done learning, like that's done and over with, like probably not the best field for you because you're always going to be learning. And so people who have that motivation to go out and learn themselves without being forced to is definitely someone who's going to be able to succeed.
So true. Kevin, how about for you? What personality traits work well?
Patience, curiosity, and adaptability. I think are three key. All those things are key in any field. But with cybersecurity, since things changing in a rapid pace, you have to be able to adapt to that change and pick up new learning styles and pick up learning new technologies. Patience. I like to mentor people. IBM has different programs where you can actually earn badges in different non-technical type skills. So mentorship is one area where I earned a badge. So, and having patience and being able to have empathy while you're working with your teammates and understanding where they're coming from, understanding how they learn and how they communicate. I think those are pretty much good non-technical skills.
I like that. There was one more question on what my background is. So I actually have graduate degrees in public administration and international relations from Syracuse. So not far from Rochester. I've certainly been to RIT's campus. And started out in government, in public service, worked at the Department of Defense, the FBI, got to go to the National Intelligence College, worked at the CIA as a political analyst on Middle East issues, was in Baghdad for a couple of stints, made the transition into cybersecurity later on in my life by a chance going to FireEye. To work on some of their intel publications. And that's kind of where I made the transition from national security issues to cybersecurity writ large. And now, I'm getting my other graduate degree from Syracuse in information technology. So I try to live the continuous learning model. Well, I know we're coming up on time. I really want to thank all of the panelists here today for being able to join. Again, Scott, Kevin, Megan, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. To the audience in the CPTC, thank you so much. I hope you've got what you need out of it. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as a way to communicate. And I think Lucas is going to we're going to put up the resources page as we close out. Thanks, everyone.